All right, so we've started recording, so going to the next question here. We're looking at how should we measure canopy. So let's assume we have the canopy limitations, we have caps, those types of things are all set. How should we as an organization be monitoring and measuring that? If we have to assess how big somebody's canopy is, how should we measure this canopy?
Okay, so I'll launch the if are we I guess we'd start with the definition. What constitutes canopy? Is it the branches and leaves and the outer edges of it? Or if we're going to try to be more creative and more useful, maybe we look at root ball size. I know root balls have nothing to do with canopy, but neither does floor space. I think it's the wrong measurement and the wrong word anyway. So, but if we have to use canopy, I think it has to be more aligned with something that's a little more objective. And then you're also looking at timing, right? Plant canopy in the first third of the life cycle, growth cycle, second third, final third. So ultimately, I think it gets back to a number of plants versus measuring canopy. And then the canopy on autoflower versus full term, it's a completely different program. I just think it creates more uncertainty and more difficulty on the enforcement side. So if you're going to measure it, I try to find something more objective.
Okay.
I would actually second that. I think if you want to try to combine essentially a system that uses kind of like a square footage model similar to the one that we're using right now, kind of breaking it down by plant, setting a certain like square footage that would be essentially allocated by plant. You need to find something that kind of accounts for plants that generally grow like thicker and wider versus some that can just grow taller. So instead of just saying like it'd be like a 5 by 5 foot square, and then you get that like a certain number of squares based on your tier level and your 30,000 square feet. So however many of those boxes, those 5 by 5s fit for a total of 30,000 square feet, then you can use something like that, or like a 3 by 3 box. That way you have a set number of plants, kind of like David alluded to or talked about there. Then it kind of makes it easier to count because you can just say, hey, this is the allocation that you get essentially per plant that counts as X square footage. When you have enough plants per your canopy to meet that square footage, you can spread them out however you want. It doesn't deal with this kind of row spacing issue. You could space them out 10, 15, 20 feet apart if you really wanted to. But then it's always going to come down to just counting the actual plants that you have, which is super simple for enforcement. Very easy to demonstrate on a site plan and kind of gives you a lot more ease of, I guess, like both consistency of enforcement and just generally ease for everyone involved, I think, in the process. So I think the by plant count works great, and we can kind of merge this with another system of saying how much does one plant get, like based on square footage, and then you can just spread them out wherever you want based on your site plan. So I think it's kind of a nice way to blend the two together, but I think a by plant basis probably makes the most sense, but we also need something to kind of rein it in.
Other thoughts?
I have a question. I mean,
Sure.
I understand like doing the plant count and then having a square footage of like how much you can do, but I mean, what if it's like a crappy year, like not a lot of sun, not a lot of rain, something happens outside of any grower's control, and you have 30,000 square feet of canopy space, and you have the most dismal yield you've ever had, like half of what you normally do. How does that? how can something like that, oh shit, this happened, what can I do for it? I mean, are those growers just screwed at that point, or can they do something else to try to counterbalance that? Because I mean, you can have 30,000 square feet of plants and say, I got half of what I normally get. Do you understand what I'm asking? Like, yield needs to kind of be something, because what if you have a plant that you're not getting a lot of flower on, it's a huge plant but it's not doing anything. I feel like that should be able to be taken in, and it's a very odd question to. There's a lot of probably different fields out there. Everyone probably has their own opinion how you should count stuff. I do like the idea of counting a specific plant, but square footage might also. I don't know. I think it's a little bit more than just. It might be situational. It might be how you're growing, where you're growing. I just think that there's a lot more nuance to this than just saying, here's some square feet, here's a plant.
All right.
Just to get a clarification from Dublin, who just commented on this, would you be asking for some kind of like overage, like capability or something like that? So can you grow in excess of your canopy up to a certain amount? Maybe how that would be dealt with? Because I guess most of what you're mentioning is kind of like what happens if you don't get a full yield, right? Versus what are you allowed to grow, or the total amount of space you're allowed to utilize, right? So I'm just curious if there's more to your question, or if that's kind of getting closer to what you were asking about.
That's kind of more similar to what I was asking. Mostly just because I just don't like the idea of just saying you may grow this many plants and that's it. I really do feel like it should be, depending on what you do with it. Maybe if there is a craft versus commercial kind of a thing, I mean, a dry weight yield of like what you can grow, like a cap like that, because that seems more concrete data that I could say, this is how much I have, this is how much I can grow, this is how much I'm going to use. I need more than that. I can either keep growing to hit my cap, or I can buy from other people who hit theirs and don't need it.
South Slope, did you still have a comment? I see your hand up.
Yeah, I do. I think that the kind of cap and trade by weight system is a viable thing. But I mean, if we're here to define canopy, my opinion on that is that the language or we should say the interpretation that has been in place, where it's an area of live plants under production, is the most usable and applicable one. And again, having seen a lot of interpretations in ways that different states and municipalities have approached this, that definition doesn't please everyone, but it is effective and usable, and by and large, it's fair, in that it allows the farmer to farm how they want to in that space. So I think that the interpretation has been good by the state of Washington, but the application of it has been uneven, and therein we've encountered problems. So I think it was a communication and enforcement issue around this. I don't think it was an interpretation of that language for live plant production. So I'm an advocate of area under of live plants under production being the definition of canopy, just plants. If we wanted to have a carve out for areas that are vegetative or used part of the year for seasonal crops, I think that's great. I don't know if that lies within the definition of canopy, but maybe it's close.
Okay. Other thoughts? Tim?
Hi. So yeah, I just wanted to throw out just a little detail. So when a plant is not yet 8 inches, it's not required to have a tag. and it's not required to be in traceability. At that time, it would be in traceability just as either a seed or a clone. And so I think it'd be worth clarifying whether or not these untagged seeds or clones that may be out in a field but aren't large enough to require a tag yet, if they would count as plant canopy or not. And I think that's something that also plays into the topic of the nursery rooms that was brought up on question 1. And I guess for the record, I'd be in favor of saying, hey, if it doesn't need a tag, it's not computed for canopy. But I think just having clarity on that would be excellent. And then I guess as long as I'm talking, I might as well say on the topic of counting plants, I think that could be a good method. And of course, all sorts of plants are different sizes. So just so it's not, I wouldn't want to see us move to a plant count system. But I think the point that the talker was making was that for each grow, you would determine an average sized plant for that particular grow, and then count the number of plants that are that average size. And interestingly, I'm pretty sure that the Canopy study group, I think it was back in 2018, Lucas Hunter, that Lucas was leading up, I'm pretty sure that's the method that they used those 2 years that they studied our canopy. When they visited my farm, that's how they described they were doing it. They found an average plant, they measured the area of that single plant, and then they counted the number of plants. And they did that for every strain or every different style of plant that they saw in the field.
All right, other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just chime in again. So I guess instead of like figuring out like an average square foot per grow, that's why I'm thinking we need something that's a little bit more of like an average that's just finite, right? And a lot of my experiences with variety of different producers, one of the bigger enemies to this whole plant canopy issue, and I think one of the big reasons why we're having these discussions about them now, is consistency of enforcement. And so creating a system that kind of gets us as close as we can get, but is consistently easily enforceable every single time, so there isn't really a question about it, would be extremely helpful to everyone. So even if we had, again, like a 3x3 square foot, like as counting as like one plant, right? So you get that much allocation, however many 3x3s you've got in your tier 1, 2, 3. If we go up to 4 or 5, whatever tier it is, that way it gives you a set amount of plants that's a nice average already, but kind of is the middle ground between, again, just like tall but narrow versus like lower but really like wide and thick. I think the consistency of enforcement is kind of what I would really hope to see in kind of these new draft rules or any changes to plant canopy. So that's just kind of why I'm thinking the way that I am, try to give people more options. That way they can spread it out as much as they want, keep them really close together. But that way it really is at the grower's discretion. It's very easy to enforce and actually go out and look and just physically count the plants. Take a little clicker and go click, 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 click. All right, you've got this many plants. I know that you're allocated these count as 3x3s. There's your canopy space. Done. So I think when we're talking about this, I would hope that everyone's thinking a little bit about consistency of enforcement or ease of enforcement, not leaving things up to kind of discretion or being super vague, just because that's going to create, I think, a lot of problems in the long run. So while we're reworking these things, I just kind of, voting for kind of consistency of enforcement, easier things to do that way.
Okay. Not sure if those hands came back up or not. So go ahead and jump in if there are other comments. We're going to probably get pulled out here in just a minute.
Okay, well, just real quickly then, I would say, plants are different sizes, and if we went with a strict just number of plants, I think that would be problematic, or it would basically force cultivators to grow large plants. So the way you would be successful in that system, if there were a certain set number of plants to grow, is just grow the largest plants you could. But I appreciate what you're saying about needing consistency and something that's easily enforceable.
All right. Any other last minute thoughts here?
Yeah, I'll chime in. I would just say, plant canopy is pretty well defined. Perhaps you could do a little bit more work on the et cetera in there. But I think everybody just wants to understand what is the methodology of enforcement, right? And then it's on each license holder to ensure they stay within their canopy limits per their license.